I need to repeat it?
Yep.
Okay, this is now 9:36. We are meeting for our Southwick Local Emergency Planning Committee. We're meeting at Southwick Town Hall, March 24th, 2022. And I'm going to call the meeting to order. Cindy, can you do a roll call for attendance?
Doug Moglen, absent. Carl Steinhardt, Charles Dunlap,
Here, present.
Russ Anderson,
Here.
Rep Banish. Absent. Mark Siegel is not, he's absent as well because he's the alternate. Randy Brown,
Here.
Cindy Sullivan here, Jennifer Willard, absent. Steve Presnall, absent. John Kane, absent. Aaron Zorick,
Here.
and Joshua Taus.
Here.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We also have two members, Ian White and Colleen Dunlop, also in attendance. Any public comments before we move on? Okay, seeing none, we have an item to accept our minutes from January 27th, 2022. I think it was sent out by email a little while ago by Cindy.
Make a motion.
Motion to accept by Charlie Dunlop. Do I hear a second?
Second.
By Karen. Cindy, roll call.
Charlie Dunlap,
Yes.
you have to, that's it. Russ Anderson,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Cindy Sullivan, yes. Karen Zorick,
Yes.
Josh Taus.
Yes.
Okay, first item for new business. We have a video to watch. It's a 19 or 20-minute video on how to survive a nuclear blast.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion to change that, change the order, to do the COVID-19 update. I have to find the video because I don't have my laptop here.
Okay.
Um,
That's fine. Tom, you mind giving me a quick little update?
Well, we have to do the motion to change it on the agenda. So I made the motion, we need a second.
Okay, have a motion, a second. The motion?
Second.
Second by Karen. Okay, now we gotta do a roll call, Cindy.
Yep. Charlie Dunlap,
Aye, yes.
Russ Anderson,
Yes.
Randy Brown,
Yes.
Cindy Sullivan, yes. Karen Zorick,
Yes.
Josh, you're on mute.
Yes.
Okay,
Tom,
thank you. So now
Tom,
we
take
have
your time.
reordering and going to old business COVID-19 update.
Before we get to that, Chair, still a little confused. I just checked with the town clerk at Emps on LEPC. I wasn't asked for this part of the roll call, so that.
Oh,
clarification on whether or not
I'm sorry, Tom, I forgot you were there.
No, it's easy to do.
Tom Fitzgerald is present at the meeting and a voting member.
March, 22 confirmed cases. 11 had one or two doses. Only 3 were under date. They were boosted. Those up to date with the ages 21, 53, 82. Out of the 22 confirmed cases, 4 were over 60. 1 vaccinated. 7 under 18. None were vaccinated. Another unrelated COVID, but still medical disease. 1 Hep C, 3 tick-borne illnesses, primarily Lyme, and 3 influenzas. All in all, COVID cases have ticked down considerably. However, there is some concern in Europe about the Ontario, which is starting to increase. So certainly not out of the woods, but as so.
Is that the BAO variant you're talking about? That's the one.
Tom, regarding you mentioned tick, Lyme disease, have heard reports that the ticks are out and very numerous right now. So,
Yes, they're definitely out. There's a warmed up. Not even in the winter, but they're even more active now.
I've had ticks on my dogs. Yes, we pulled them off last night. They're out. Anything else on COVID? Cindy, did you find that video?
I have to sign into my email. I'm used to having my own laptop and I don't have it here. So the answer is no, I don't have it. I'm not able to sign into my email here.
I have the email, can I forward to you or?
I can't get onto my email on this
Even like
laptop.
your email, so-
Sorry.
So this is a video, how to survive the first hour of a nuclear blast. I found this on YouTube. I think it was created about 2-3 years ago, but it was actually very interesting and I thought pretty well done and pretty pertinent to what we're going through today, potentially going through Eastern Europe. I sent it on March 4th.
Guy with the gun, the person who do anything to protect.
Everybody see that?
But did you know that you can go to jail simply for doing the right thing, doing what you had to do to keep your family safe? Don't end up behind bars because you didn't know.
We don't see it. I don't see it.
Yeah, same
Okay,
here. I
hold
can't
on, I
see it.
gotta share my screen.
I don't know.
Is it this one?
Created this 100%.
You see it now?
Thumbs up if you can see.
Yeah, I can see it.
Going to understand these 6 things could be the difference. That time behind bars for you. That's not what I want. Emergency alert.
The Emergency Management Agency flooded the cell phones of January 13th, 2018. Or lay on the floor. Understandably, chaos ensued. There were reports of cells evacuating residents, parents and children lying underneath mattresses, and people stuck in traffic and bad. Others ignored the advice to stay indoors and headed to the beach, worrying they could be trapped in a collapsing building, similar to 9/11. Yet the seconds passed, and there was no missile, no explosion, no nuclear annihilation. 38 minutes after the initial emergency broadcast, the following message came through. It had been a mistake. Someone had selected the wrong option during a routine check, turning a test scenario. It was played out in TV and movies for years. The nuke automatically obliterate your entire city? Will the flash incinerate your retinas? Where is the safest place to hide? It is debunked. Where is the truth from the myths? Humanity, nuclear weapons have only ever been used in warfare twice, back in 1945, when the US dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan at the end of World War II.
It's not as the people talking with and already descending upon them as the
Bomb that fell on Hiroshima, codenamed, exploded with a force of between 4 and 15,000 tons of TNT and immediately wiped out an area of 13 kilometers, 270 meters across, with a surface temperature of 6,000 degrees Celsius. That's about the same as the surface of our sun. The results of both bombs were catastrophic, with an estimated 185,000 deaths as a result of the attacks. Perhaps the most miraculous story that came out of the atomic bombings is that of Tomoyo Yamaguchi, who saw a bomber in the sky while on a business trip in Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. Suddenly, I thought the sun had fallen from the sky. He had just enough time to throw himself into a ditch, and even though he was just 3 kilometers away from the center of the blast, he survived, albeit seriously burned, temporarily blind, and with burst eardrums. He returned home to Nagasaki just in time to live. And once again, he somehow managed to survive. A beautiful stairwell that reduced the ferocity of the blast in the building, holding it you to decide whether he's the luckiest or unluckiest man in history. Yet, while Mr. Yamaguchi is the only recognized survivor of both attacks, a doctor 165 fellow citizens who lived through both bombings. In fact, despite the death and devastation, the vast majority of people living in either city survived, with approximately 71% in Hiroshima and 76% in Nagasaki making it through the attack. This should give us all hope that should the unthinkable happen, we might just make it out alive. We've come a long way since World War II. The most powerful nuclear weapon ever created, the Tsar Bomba, was detonated by the USSR in 1961. The last it produced was 50 megatons. That's more than 3,000 Hiroshimas, or 10 times the total. 2. Even if you'd stood 100 kilometers away, you'd have gone 30. Now, I've got some very bad news and some slightly less bad news. The very bad is that Russia is currently developing a 100 megaton nuclear torpedo. That's double nuclear torpedoes in New York City, then 8 million people would be killed. However, the slightly less the US government produced a report looking at how authorities should respond to a nuclear attack. They weren't concentrating. Instead, their focus was on smaller, improvised nuclear devices, or INDs, the sort of device likely to be used by a terrorist organization, and thus are more likely to deal with. As the report itself noted,
a low-yield explosion from an IND is quite different from Cold War strategic thermal scenarios upon which much of our current understanding and civil defense planning are based.
So, just how big could a TI want? To the report, anywhere up to 10 kilograms, which is almost as powerful as the first atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Thus, fatalities and casualties thousands rather than billions. I did say it was slightly less bad news, not good news. Ultimately, though, your chances of survival boil down to 2 factors: the yield of the bomb being detonated, your proximity to ground zero, and your immediate response to the attack. Let's examine each turn.
If you struggle to lose weight, you must see this. A fat dissolving loophole that's just beneath that can dissolve thin.
The yield of a nuclear weapon is a reference to the energy it releases. The bigger the yield, bomb, usually given in kilotons or T. It's the yield of the bomb that will decide how likely you are to die in an instant. Reality. While we're here, let's take a moment to dispel a common misconception about the damage dealt by a powerful nuclear bomb. It's logical to assume that a bomb 1,000 times more powerful than another sometimes as powerful as the one that hit Hiroshima would produce serious blast damage over an area 100 surface or in the air. The geography of the location, or even just the weather, can have an impact on the ultimate outcome of the blast. Looking back again at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, even though the second So let's take a look at the incident most likely, the detonation of a nuclear device. For the sake of argument, we'll say ground zero is here, center point in London. It's detonated at surface level. The yellow fireball, which has a radius of about 200 meters for our relatively modest bomb. Remember, the surface temperature of the fireball is similar to that of our sun. Needless to say, getting caught with super shockwave. Here, the pressure of the blast is so great that most buildings are destroyed, and while humans can physically withstand the pressure, the hurricane. Every week, almost 4 people in this area are 70 meters from the center of the explosion. Looking further out, we see the extent of the blue circle, which illustrates the medium strength shockwave. You are likely to find numerous fatalities and extensive injuries amongst those who have managed to survive. Almost 1 kilometer from ground zero. At 1.25 kilometers, we're reaching the limit of the extreme radiation. Within this green circle, people are absorbing doses of radiation 800 times greater than the average American is exposed to in an entire year. What this means in practice is death rates poisoning, leading to painful deaths lasting anywhere from just a few hours to several weeks. Expect to suffer from nausea and headaches to begin with, followed by your hair falling out, bleeding, and increased chance of infection if you make it beyond the first few days. Then, finally, the orange circle, which extends just over 1.4 kilometers from ground zero, shows the thermal radiation produced by the blast. The heat is so intense that third-degree burns are almost inevitable. These can be fatal themselves or require amputation. Even beyond this area, first and second-degree burns are would have been decimated by the high. Approximately 30,000 people would have died, with 75,000 more injured. Some estimates of the death toll in such densely populated areas are more distressing, coming in at 100,000. According to Erwin Redliner, director of the National Center for Disaster Preparedness at Columbia University, even at 13 kilometers, there's between a 10 to 20% chance of dying instantly from a 10 kiloton device. So let's take a look at a second scenario. What would happen if our bomber had been detonated at the same place in London? Unsurprisingly, a bomb 5,000 times more powerful produces annihilation, with over 4.5 million estimated fatalities and it's probably best not to think what those doomsday torpedoes the Russians are currently working on could do. Regardless of how powerful the bomb is, if you get caught in this area, your chances of survival are going to take a significant hit, with rock bottom if you happen to be unlucky enough to find yourself close to the fireball at ground zero. To make matters worse, we haven't even looked at the Fear not, because this is where knowing what to do in the first hour of a nuclear attack might be between life and death. Right, so now it's time to take a look at the second factor. Determine your chances of survival. You respond to the attack.
Noise or injuries in 3 ways. Like lack. These then
Deputy Director at the National Centre for Disaster Preparedness.
If you see a nuclear flash, the first thing to do is get behind a barrier in case the shockwave comes.
Bear in mind that the shockwave is travelling at hundreds of kilometres an hour. You won't have long to find cover. When Yamaguchi took shelter in a nearby ditch, however, the shockwave lifted him up off the ground, spun him around like a tornado, and threw him into a nearby field. Radiation safety specialist Brooke Budmeier. Sheltering behind something that is structurally sound.
And from the blast wave in particular, be in an area where if there's a dramatic jolt, think
If you manage to survive the shockwave, things are sad. You don't get much easier. It's now a real race against time. Essentially, when the bomb goes off, the explosion creates an immense amount of dust and debris, which combine with the radioactive products that result from the nuclear reaction at the heart of it. This radioactive dirt is drawn upward into the sky by the intense heat. As the particles cool, they make their way back to the ground, and that fallout is trouble for you.
you will have some time to take action to keep safe. The biggest thing, get inside, stay inside, and stay tuned.
The likelihood is that you'll have somewhere between 10 to 20 minutes shelter. To make matters worse, you might also be blind. Ends up basically miniature suns are a bit overwhelming for your eyesight. Fortunately, this lack of vision is a minute. Unfortunately, if the attack happens at night and you're out in the dark, up to 35 minutes. For the sake of argument, we'll say our hypothetical situation takes place during the day, since not being blind makes it a lot easier to find shelter. I'm also preparing for the end of the world and built your own state-of-the-art fallout shelter. Can you be in your shelter? Even at the height of the Cold War, when nuclear obliteration haunted everyone's lives,
It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba as an
less than 2% of Americans ever actually bothered to build a bomb shelter or create a safe space in their basement. It doesn't apply to Switzerland, which has built around 250,000 shelters, enough to accommodate its entire population. But there's a good chance you don't have a spare bunker lying around, so should you go?
I used to be addicted to coffee. I was sick of going to your in 2018, I started with water to offer order.
First off, don't stay in your car. The metal doors and glass windows are going to be way too thin to protect you from gamma radiation. Mobile homes won't offer adequate shelter either. Instead, try to find a basement or a larger multi-story building. Key factor is putting as many thick layers between you and the fallout. We're talking concrete or brick here. So nice looking glass skyscrapers or homes built out of wood and plaster aren't your best bets. If you're in a city with a subway system, heading deep inside would also offer a decent net. Assuming you've made it inside somewhere above ground, avoid the top floor. There are emitting dangerous levels of gamma radiation, which could lead to radiation poisoning. Instead, get to the center of the building. If there's time to close off areas where fallout might use air conditioners, windows, do it. Okay, let's look at a slightly different scenario, one where things didn't go quite so smoothly. This time we've abandoned our car and sprinted to the nearest sturdy looking building, but fallout might be starting to land around you. If you think it is, the best thing to do is cover your nose and mouth with a rag and close your eyes. Stumbling around like this won't be easy. So in this example, it's taken 15 minutes to actually did any of that fallout land on you? Is it in your hair or your clothes? It might be. which means you're at risk of getting acute radiation poisoning. Too much of a pessimist, but a bad sign at this stage is if you've already started vomiting. Since your gut is highly sensitive to radiation, puking is a sign you've absorbed a pretty heavy dose of the bad stuff, and the prognosis, death. If you haven't started hurling everywhere, there's plenty of things you can do to get rid of any fallout that might be on you. Carefully remove your outer layer of clothing. This material. Put it in a plastic bag and leave it somewhere far out of the way. Take your time. Wiping your kids off too quickly might shake free any radioactive dust. Would also be quite handy. By all means, treat yourself to some soap and shampoo to help wash yourself off, but avoid using conditioner. It will bind radioactive particles to your hair. I'm afraid it's one of the many casualties of a nuclear disaster. Even if there's no shower, wash your face, hands, and any body parts that were uncovered using a sink, damp cloth, or wet wipe. Again, the key is using plenty of water and taking your time. The last thing you want to do is scratch yourself and allow radioactive material to get into your skin. By now, it's likely an hour has passed, which means that the radioactive fallout outside will have already decayed by 50%. Within the first 24 hours, it would have given up 80% of its energy, going up to 99% after 2 weeks. But remember, if radiation is high enough to begin with, that 1% could still be dangerous. So staying indoors for as long as significantly possible reduces your chances of contamination. According to the US State Department,
the importance of sheltering in place, preferably inside a sealed room, for at least the first 48 hours after a nuclear detonation cannot be overemphasized.
If you can, agencies to send help and listen out for their instructions before vacating your safe spot. If you are worried about Kim Jong-un going nuclear, a homemade terrorist bomb, or Alexa becoming starting World War III, then you might be interested in preparing a basic emergency supply kit. Chances are, though, you're not going to be carrying this with you when disaster strikes. So, just remember this. Get inside, stay inside, and stay tuned. And you might just make it. If you're watching, check out the video that's on screen now. If you haven't subscribed, then please click on the button below. And if you'd like to
Thank you, Cindy. Any discussion on that video?
little
Go ahead,
bit.
John.
1960 to 1964, I served in the Air Force. My job was detecting EMPs from nuclear radiation through MEMA. Federal government, I've had intensive training. Radiation, particles, alpha, beta, and gamma. The alpha particle can be protected by a simple sheet of paper. The beta would be protected by a sheet of metal aluminum foil. And gamma would be several feet of concrete, lead, and ground. Protection would be to stay sheltered away from the nuclear fallout if you survive for up to 72 hours because of the decay factor of the nuclear particles. The emphasis is on having a shelter and provisions so that you could stay sheltered for that amount of time.
Thank you. Scary stuff to think about. Anybody else? All right, we're gonna go. Anybody else have any other new business to talk about before we adjourn? Going once, twice. Okay, I will take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Cindy and Martin, second. Second by Charlotte. All in favor?
Aye.
Roll call.
No, we don't.
Okay.